kicked off August by finishing Jusant. This is a very relaxing and meditative game that I found myself sinking into whenever I was feeling a little bit tense or stressed. It's also a very explorative game where you don't really get that much setup and have to piece together what's going on as you play. All you know starting out is there's this huge towering rock and you need to climb to the top. As you climb, you'll find collectibles like letters and diary entries that help you piece together exactly what happened. The area was once surrounded by a great ocean, until one day it just kept receding, leaving nothing but the desert behind. The letters and diaries are all written by the same few people, and the higher you climb, the older they get, giving you this eerie experience of picking up the pieces of an entire lifetime that has long since come to an end. Other collectibles like the seashells will play ambient sounds of what the area was like before, with splashing water and bustling civilization. After listening to one of these, the contrast with the regular near silence felt a lot more impactful. As for gameplay, it's very simple with a steady flow of progression as you go. Climbing is done by pressing alternating triggers on a controller and pushing the analog stick. It's very straightforward, but gets you into a meditative flow where you hardly realize you're doing it and can just focus on the path you want to take. New mechanics like growing nearby plants or hitching a ride on these little rock creatures kept things fresh, but it never really got all that complex. This is totally fine by the way, but if you're looking for something that will really push you in the gameplay department, this simply isn't it. Visually, the game looks beautiful. It's obviously going for a very particular style and I believe it pulls it off perfectly. The vast environments give you this great sense of scale and the design of the protagonist makes them feel almost like someone from a different world with just how much they contrast with the world around them. A special mention goes out to his little friend who is extremely cute and gave me immense joy whenever he was on screen. My one major complaint with this game is honestly probably the point. There are certain parts of this game that, once completed, you cannot return to. This means that several collectibles were permanently lost to me if I didn't scour the map effectively enough beforehand. This is okay, aside from the fact that they can happen with no warning and a simple drop down or a shimmy through a crack can mean being locked out from ever going back. This world is extremely interesting to me, and I want to get as complete a story as I can, so having the option to go all the way from the bottom to the top with no impassable areas or loading screens would have been nice. This combined with the occasionally repetitive gameplay lands this one a strong 8 out of 10. It's still a really beautiful game, but just let me experience all of that beauty without having to keep restarting. About halfway through August, I went on a trip down to Old London Town, loaded up my Steam Deck with a bunch of games to pass the travel time. I started Crow Country on the train down there, and it sunk its claws into me so deep, I completed it before I even got home. It's a PlayStation 1 survival horror game, akin to something like the classic Resident Evils. It's set in a crow-themed amusement park. An abandoned theme park is already a pretty creepy spot at the best of times, but adding a bunch of crow theming to the mix with a low poly PS1 art style gives this game an iconic visual look. All of the characters have distinct designs that work within the limitations of the style to remain memorable despite their lack of details. Each monster type also has a design which uses the lack of detail and the brain's ability to fill in the blanks to create truly horrifying visuals. The first time I saw this gangly little fella, I felt my stomach churn at just how uncomfortable it made me feel seeing it shamble towards me. The soundtrack is the icing on top of the presentation and immerses you in this theme park whilst reminding you that something terrible is happening at every stray note. All in all, the presentation really makes this game feel almost like a nightmare with the low poly art style and creepy ambience. The actual substance of this game is also pretty great. As I said, it's a PlayStation 1 style survival horror, so that means some intentionally awkward gunplay, monsters at every turn, and lots of exploring and backtracking. If you ignore the enemies, this is a puzzle game at heart. You travel across the map finding new key items that help you unlock new areas so you can find more items, rinse and repeat until credits. The puzzles were challenging enough that I did get stuck a couple of times, but it was more so because I played half the game on the train down, did 3 days of heavy tourism, and played the rest on the train back, so I kind of forgot a few things in the middle. Copium? Perhaps, but the point I'm getting at is if you're paying close attention and making some good mental, or even physical notes to really get into the retro mood, you should be just fine, especially given this game's shorter runtime. The combat, as I said, is intentionally awkward, meaning high pressure combat was often me panicking and shooting half my bullets into the scenery before finally finding my target. I don't mind this so much since it adds to the pressure and tension. If I was to have one small complaint about the combat, it's almost too often. Enemies are everywhere, and a lot of the time I was just trying to get from A to B and would get clipped by an enemy whilst moving past, which caused me to burn through healing items. It is my own fault, but I feel like less is more in horror games. They stop being too scary and were instead a bit of an annoyance. Lastly, the plot. I don't want to spoil too much since there are a large number of twists and turns, but you're essentially searching for the owner of the theme park. After an incident results in the serious injury of a guest, he's gone missing, and you, a suspiciously small police officer, are sent in to find him. It keeps you on your toes quite nicely and moves along at a steady pace, and I was still guessing what was going on, or if any of this was even real, right up until the end. It does a great job of introducing all these characters over the course of the game and tying them up together in the end, making for a very satisfying conclusion. Overall, I very much enjoyed this one, and if I had more time, I honestly wouldn't mind going for that max rank perfect max difficulty run, but for this playthrough, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Once I got back, I had to catch up on some work, so games did take a bit of a back seat. But then, one of my favourite games got a new DLC, so I made sure I found time to jump back on board. Dredge released last year and was my game of the year, and yes, that means it beats Baldur's Gate 3. I said what I said. It's a Lovecraftian fishing game with a great style, interesting story, and was also made by like 4 people. The base game is a masterpiece, and you should absolutely play it. The Iron Rig DLC adds a new drilling platform to the map, and once you dock, you find they're in need of a lot of help, with most of their supplies having been sunk en route. Once you've helped them rebuild the platform a little, they'll start drilling, and naturally, the forces below the waves don't take too kindly to this. Over the course of the DLC, you end up going back to all 5 base game areas, and you're tasked with catching new fish types that have escaped when the drill cracked the seabed. To do this, you'll need some new gear, and you can build an upgrade from the rig itself. And as someone coming into this with an endgame save with a maxed out ship and thousands in the bank, this both excited and upset me. The town building mechanic is really cool, and as you build up the platform more and more, you unlock new ways to upgrade your vessel, new consumable items, and much more. Sadly, since I had thousands sitting in the bank, I never really had to work for any of these upgrades all that much, aside from the minimal amount of resource collection, so that did take a little bit of the wind out of my sails. Playing this with a fresh save will likely get you a far better experience when playing it from the start of a basic ship, so I won't hold it against the DLC because that one's on me. Still, I had a lot of fun collecting all the new gear and seeing what new fish species there were to collect. The plot for this DLC is also pretty on par with the rest of the game, aka very good. You help out the rig, grab samples for a doctor who seems to be losing it a little bit, the middle manager turns up and naturally makes everything worse, and you essentially try to help the people on board understand what's going on and avoid letting giant beasts drag them down below the waves. It keeps things moving fast, is well written, and all of the characters look as great as you'd expect coming from the rest of the game. I ain't got loads to say about this one since it's more Dredge, so an instant win. If you like the base game, which you do, don't lie, you'll like this since it's more of the same with some new spice added on top for good measure. I'm going to give it another 9 out of 10. Lastly, I wrapped up August by finally getting around to the Separate Ways DLC for Resident Evil 4. Now, I'm a bit of a Resident Evil 4 hater. I don't think the game is bad, but I do think it's a little bit overrated for what it is. My problem with the base game is that it just goes on for far too long, and thankfully, the DLC doesn't share this issue. It's short and sweet, and unsurprisingly follows Ada as she goes her separate way to Leon over the course of the base game. The plot is very typical Resident Evil, also known as a little bit of action schlock in that endearing way that Resi games do so well, some slightly convoluted plot points that will probably come up in like 5 games time, and some funny moments that slightly pull you out of the horror, but not enough to ruin it. I did hear that some people sent the Ada voice actress death threats because of her performance, and I'm here to say, what happened? She sounds fine, on par with Leon at the very least, and I had no problems with her performance any more than anyone else.
I'm seeing quite the crowd here. I wonder what has them so riled up.
Also, while we're talking about Ada, she's dripped out to the gills, and I was absolutely horny on main at all times, as is the way when playing anything in the series. The actual plot here is just fine, and it helps fill in the blanks from the base game and how she showed up where she did and new things that she knew. It's always cool to see something we've already played from a different perspective, so it was fun to drop in on Leon and disappear without a trace instead of being the one looking around all confused. The gameplay here is obviously more Resi 4 with a couple of key changes that made Ada feel a lot different to play. Her iris puzzles weren't anything revolutionary, but they were something that Leon never did. The grappling hook, however, made the game feel extremely fresh in a number of ways. Outside of combat, it allowed Ada to get around the world and access routes that Leon never could, making the game feel a lot more vertical rather than just linear hallways. In combat, it allowed her to leap across large distances to melee enemies, which never failed to feel great. Later, I unlocked the ability to pull away enemy shields, giving me an easy way to take them out at the cost of taking quite a bit of time to pull off. She also has a very limited arsenal of weapons, and this is one area where I feel like it could have seen a little bit more variety. All in all, if you like the original, then this is more of that with some extra accessories, so only an improvements. Overall, I like the game a little more than the base game, mainly due to it not overstaying its welcome, and getting to stare at Ada for all those hours. So I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. And that was August. A bit of a small month than usual, but still, I'm not complaining since all the games I played, I actually really enjoyed. I want to thank you all for the amazing support on the Horror of Non-Existence video. I really felt like I put my all into that, so to see it get such a strong reception is really blown me away. I really can't thank you enough. It also helped get the channel over 1,000 subscribers, and the channel doesn't even have 10 videos yet, so to have over 1,000 subscribers is just mind-blowing. So thank you again for that. I'm going to be thanking you a lot in this video, I guess. For future essays, I still have tons of ideas. In fact, I've started, you can see some, I suppose you call it pre-production on my new whiteboard over there. So look forward to that. The pace might not be super quick because I kind of like to take my time and release them when they're really good and ready, and I feel like I put everything into them. But rest assured, definitely more videos coming. I'm going to keep doing this for as long as I still enjoy it, and at the moment, there's no signs of that slowing down. Also, because we hit 1,000 subscribers, I have the option to turn on memberships, so if you want to support the channel directly, there is now an option to do that. But I can't stress enough just how optional this option is. I make these videos because I really enjoy doing it, so feel no pressure to do anything extra than you are already doing. Watching and subscribing is already honestly way more than I ever expected. So if you want to do this, you can get yourself listed in the credits and get some early clips I'd normally send to my 2 friends. But apart from that, completely optional. You're not missing out on anything, especially at the highest tier. I just kind of, there was a 3rd tier option, so I just placed one in. Don't feel any pressure to do that, really. You don't need to. Thank you very much. The option is there. You don't need to. Anyway, this intro is already getting longer than parts of the actual video. So for now, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Like the video if you did. Love yourself, no matter what. And I'll see you in the next one.